Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Today I want to talk about my maternal grandfather, that's my mother's father, Alexander MacDonald, CBE, 1894 to 1954, a popular and talented man who belonged to Glasgow and Santiago, Chile. And here he is on the left side. Golf was one of his major passions. He designed the golf course at Santo Domingo in Chile. He supervised the planting of the course, which opened in 1946. It's now a beautiful and renowned championship course. He was appointed president of the Asociación de Golf de Chile, briefly, I think after the war. The last course he designed was Los Incas in Lima, Peru, which opened in 1949. And his portrait is still hanging there at the Santo Domingo Golf Club. Okay, here are the contents of this presentation. Family background, Glasgow. Education, Glasgow. First World War, France. Accountancy career, Peru from 1919 to 26. Chile from 1926 to 54. Concluding remarks, and then 3 appendices. So first of all, family background. Alexander was born in Glasgow on the 26th of September, 1894. He was one of 7 children of Charles MacDonald, who was Chief Inspector of Weights and Measures, Glasgow. Charles MacDonald had 2 sons and 5 daughters, and Alexander was the eldest son. This is an obituary of Charles MacDonald in the Evening Telegraph, which was a local newspaper, as I understand it, based in Dundee, but also with National Scottish News. The precise date of death is not given, but this is from the bottom right corner of page 3 of the edition of the newspaper of June the 9th, 1924. And I have transcribed it, as you will see in the next slide. Here we are. So, death of popular Glasgow official. The death of Mr. Charles MacDonald, Chief Inspector of Weights and Measures, Glasgow, took place at his residence, 3 Wendover Crescent, Mount Florida, after a brief illness. Mr. MacDonald entered the service of Glasgow Corporation over 43 years ago and was for 33 years in the Weights and Measures Department, in which he was Chief Inspector for over 25 years. In this position, he proved himself an able administrator, and when he attained his semi-jubilee, that's 25 years service, he was appropriately honored by the members of the staff and a large and representative company of other friends. In the affairs of the Incorporated Society of Inspectors of Weights and Measures, Mr. MacDonald took a leading part, and frequently he read papers at its meetings on questions of administration and other subjects having a bearing upon the subject of weights and measures. He was a native of Morinch, Banffshire, and was a past president of the Moray and Banff Friendly Society, and that's in the Scottish Highlands. Taking a kindly interest in the natives of these counties who came to reside in Glasgow. For many years, he was an elder in Langside Hill United Free Church. Mr. MacDonald was 65 years of age and is survived by his wife, 5 daughters and 2 sons, the elder of whom, this is Alexander, is a chartered accountant in South America. Okay, I'm quite interested by the fact that he read papers at meetings, which is I do a lot of that still. That's been my academic life. So I have that in common with him. And then Charles MacDonald was also a chess player. And we have at least one family member. One of my brothers is a chess player. So I think that gene has been passed down as well. And then I think also the popularity gene, if there is one, has been passed down. Okay, so here's the education of Alexander MacDonald. He went to school at Hutcheson's Boys Grammar School, Glasgow. It's now boys and girls. So Hutchison's Grammar School, Glasgow. At the time, it was boys only. He matriculated at Glasgow University in 1914 to 15 to study law. And the First World War interrupted his undergraduate studies, and like many of his contemporaries, he was never able to resume them, unfortunately. And I received this recently from Glasgow University Archives and Special Collections. It's a photograph of his entry in the matriculation album for 1914 to 15, the session 1914 to 15, the fee 1 guinea or £1, 1 shilling. He's written it in his own handwriting, which I suppose he was required to do. There we are, Alexander MacDonald, age 20, born in Glasgow, father's Christian name Charles, Chief Inspector of Weights and Measures of Glasgow. Is father alive? Yes, he was at the time. And Alexander was studying law, specifically mercantile law, and he was in his first year at the university. And there's the address, 3 Wendover Crescent, Mount Florida, Glasgow, which agrees with the one in the obituary I've just read. And his signature, Alexander MacDonald. And I rather treasure this. It's I like his handwriting as well. So there we are. Let's move on. So First World War, 1914 to 1918. Alexander MacDonald served in France in the 6th Morayshire Battalion Territorial of the Seaforth Highlanders, a Scottish Highland regiment. And his father had links with Banff and Morayshire. So I think that may have been the reason he was in that particular regiment in the first place. Service records indicate that he was a lieutenant in 1916 with a Silver War badge. This lapel badge was given to those who were honorably discharged due to wounds or sickness during World War I, and each badge was uniquely numbered on the reverse side. He was invalided out of the army, having been wounded in the leg and fallen victim to poison gas, which led to chronic asthma. He appears to have been employed at the Ministry of Labour in 1917. This is from army records that I've checked online. The recommended long-term treatment for asthma in those days was to seek a dry climate in which to live. Scotland was no longer an option because it was too damp and wet. Various places were suggested, including California, Melbourne, Australia, and Chile. And now something about his accountancy career. Alexander MacDonald became a member of the Glasgow Institute of Accountants and Actuaries in 1919, which became the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Scotland in 1951. This I got from an email from that body, which I received when I was checking on his records in passing the exam. According to his sisters, Janie and Betty, he studied very hard for the qualification in the front room at the family home. He worked for Deloitte, Plender, Griffiths and Company in South America, first in Peru and then Chile, as a partner for many years, from 1925 to 1948. From 1948, separate firms were established in Peru and Chile, and he left Deloitte at that time. This is from the history of Deloitte, which I refer to later on by name. His last place of employment from 1948 until his death in 1954 was Industrias Eléctricas y Musicales Odeon, S.A., Santiago, Chile, which was a subsidiary company of EMI. Okay, next is Peru, 1919 to 26. Alexander MacDonald, I think Mac was the name he got in the British community, was in Peru for 8 years, but he had not originally intended to be there. Following medical advice, he got a job in Chile with Deloitte, and in 1919 set off bound for Santiago on a steamer via the Panama Canal. When he got to Callao, which is the port for Lima in Peru, He received a message from Chile that he should disembark because the partner in the Lima office had died, so he was then obliged to work in Lima until further notice. The climate of central Lima was poor. It was built originally by the Spaniards on a swamp, allegedly on the advice of the Incas. So he had to go and live in Chosica, a healthier town or suburb in the foothills of the Andes, and commute to work. And he was enthusiastic about golf in Lima. Marriage and children. Dorothy, usually known as Susan, I think that was the name she preferred, I don't know why, Lester Northcroft, born in the Bahamas on the 18th of July, 1896, meanwhile, had been working in London during the First World War as a secretary in the Ministry of Defense or something of that kind. After her mother died in 1914, her father remarried and she decided to leave home as soon as the war ended. She applied for work as a secretary in the British consulate in Lima, and thanks to polite and kind treatment by the gentleman who interviewed her and offered her a seat, she took the job. So on such small matters do lives turn. She took a boat to Peru and at some point met Alexander there. They married on the 24th of June, 1922 in Lima and had many British friends there with whom they kept in touch. Their son, Ian Lester MacDonald, was born in Edinburgh on the 6th of April, 1923. Their daughter, Mary Elizabeth, born on the 28th of March, 1925 in Bella Vista, Callao, died, alas, in November of that year as an infant of meningitis, and she is buried in Callao. Their third child, Margaret Ann, was born in Santiago, Chile on the 19th of April, 1932. So 3 children. And here is Dorothy Lester or Susan Northcroft in Lima, aged 25 in 1921, before her marriage to Alexander MacDonald. And I must say, I do like this photograph. I do remember her actually, later in her life. Okay, so Alexander and Dorothy, this is a photograph of them, Alexander and Susan MacDonald in Chile, year unknown. In 1945, he wrote, "I have always loved Susan, and there never could be anyone else in my affections. Throughout 23 years of married life, we had a lot of ups and downs, but always loved each other. Often, far too often, I was a trial to her, and sometimes she irritated me beyond measure. I do not believe it possible for a man and woman to live happily together with never a cross word." That's quite an interesting comment, I find, and one which I can understand, I believe. All right, so Chile, 1926 to 1954. After 8 years in Peru, Alexander and Susan went to live in Santiago, Chile in 1926 and stayed there for the rest of his life. As the saying goes, he blossomed or bloomed where he was planted. He became the senior partner in Deloitte Blender Griffiths, which at that time was Chile and Peru. He was very well known in Chile in fishing, golf, and chess playing circles. He was very popular, as his father Charles had been in Glasgow. Refer to the obituary above. He was on the board of various companies and was asked to take over the running of Odeon SA as managing director. He had a passion for music and used to bring 78 RPM records home. That's revolutions per minute, RPM. And then the first long playing records, LPs, featuring all the famous orchestras of the time. I certainly used to have a collection of long playing records, but I'm too young to have had 78s. He had a keen sense of humor, and while his daughter Margaret was studying at Edinburgh University for a LRAM, that's a licentiate of the Royal Academy of Music, in the early 1950s, Sir Malcolm Sargent, the famous orchestral conductor, came to stay in Santiago and was great fun, adding to Alexander's large fund of jokes. So here's a bit more about the children. Ian rode horses and accompanied his father on fishing trips in the south of Chile. Well, at least one, possibly, I think more. Margaret enjoyed outdoor activities, for example, swimming in private pools in Santiago. There was a large British expatriate community, and Alexander, known to all as Mac, was a central pillar. There was an expatriate country club in Santiago, the Prince of Wales Country Club, which still exists, and the MacDonalds frequented that at weekends. Stepping out of the expat bubble, increasingly through his many interests, golf, etc., Alexander also became involved with the local Chilean community, and he helped to design the beautiful Los Leones golf course opened in 1937. He was very popular with the Chileans. And as evidence for his popularity with the Chileans, I give you this. Here he is on the left side with a Chilean gentleman, I'm not sure who. But I also have a quotation from Augustine Edwards McClure, who was a lawyer, diplomat, and businessman, and who wrote the foreword to Alexander MacDonald's Trout Fishing in Chilean Rivers, the book he wrote about fishing. So what did McClure say? As a Chilean, I feel I owe a debt of gratitude to the author for writing a book about a sport, that's fishing, which is bound to attract English-speaking visitors to my country. It shows that in the many years he has spent here, he has felt in congenial surroundings and among people he likes. That is always a reciprocal feeling, and one never likes people who do not like you, for life is like a mirror that smiles at you when you smile back. He repays generously the hospitality we have been glad to give him and shows we gave it to the right person. So Augustine Edwards McClure was quite a distinguished man. As you can see, he was president of the League of Nations from 1922 to 1923. He also served as a diplomat in London, I think minister, I'm not quite sure, in about 1910. So, and he, reading his foreword, he was a very cultured man, and he included a lot of interesting quotations in the foreword to the book. Okay, music, religion, and charity work. Alexander taught Margaret to play the piano, at which she later excelled. He also played the organ at church and played many First World War tunes by ear. He learned to do this during the war when soldiers would whistle tunes for him, saying, "It goes like this, sir." And he had to provide an ad-lib accompaniment at sing-song parties. All the family went to the Anglican church every Sunday. Margaret went to Sunday school and was a girl guide, and apparently she also kept canaries. Susan's father, George J.H. Northcroft, had been a Methodist minister, and he was a missionary in the Bahamas where she was born. Susan did a lot of charity work, for example, running a soup kitchen after an earthquake, probably the 7.6 magnitude one, which occurred on February the 23rd, 1933, for which he was awarded an MBE in 1934. Of course, I live in Japan, so we're very familiar with earthquakes and the devastation they cause here. We also are on the Pacific Rim. So during World War II, Alexander and Susan led the support for the war effort in the British community. They were very committed, organizing people to knit balaclavas and socks to send to the troops, etc. In my Ernest Sato research, actually, he refers to sending socks to the troops in the First World War. So that was interesting. Obviously, it was something which was often done by British communities. Susan was a great supporter of those who needed moral support, probably from her Methodist background. Her mother, Emily Florence Northcroft, née Lester, had been a successful author of books such as Forces That Help. Keeping in touch with Britain in the 1930s and during the war, when the BBC News was broadcast on an old-fashioned radio called a wireless in those days, the whole family sat and listened, especially during World War II. The war made the need to communicate with far-flung expatriate communities much more urgent, and those communities were hungry for news. Margaret remembers that her godfather, Graham Balfour, who was assistant headmaster at the Grange School, was an avid listener to the news. They always listened to the royal Christmas broadcasts. The first one ever by King George V was from Sandringham in Norfolk in 1932, and that's available on YouTube now, and there's the reference. And here's a footnote about the Grange School. It was founded in 1928 in Santiago by John Andrew Stewart Jackson, an Anglo-Chilean born in Valparaiso, educated at Cheltenham College and Cambridge University, the same as myself, in fact. It was modeled on Cheltenham College and flourishes in the present day. I think there are about 2,000 pupils now in the junior and senior parts of the school. Ian MacDonald was one of the first pupils, and his name is recorded in the school's Roll of Honour. So, Second World War, 1939 to 45. Margaret recalls that her parents and friends were very patriotic, and they thought Winston Churchill was just brilliant. Well, they used to listen. At the time, his speeches were quite formidable. They really kept the morale of the people up. I'm sure they did. Of course, nowadays, people have different views about Churchill, but at the time, that's what they thought, I'm sure. Alexander MacDonald was awarded the CBE, that's Commander of the British Empire, in the New Year's Honours List 1943 for services to the British community in Chile. In particular, he was chairman of the war effort. And Dorothy, Susan, had received the MBE, Member of the British Empire, also for services to the British community in Chile in 1934. And we still have these in the family. There's Alexander's CBE on the left, Dorothy's or Susan's MBE on the right. Ian Lester MacDonald, 1923 to 1945, remembered with love and pride, which is the inscription on his headstone in the Commonwealth War Graves Cemetery in Rheinberg in Germany, where he is buried. Tragedy struck the family again late in February 1945, when Ian was killed in Germany fighting as a lieutenant in the Black Watch Regiment, Scottish regiment. It seems Alexander never really recovered from this blow. In an attempt perhaps to ease his pain and achieve some catharsis, he wrote in longhand a brief but highly personal biography of his son, which was finally published in 2017. Okay, and here are 3 photographs which include Ian. The one in the middle is at the beach in Chile before going to Scotland for his high school education. And the one on the left is Ian Chile MacDonald, as he was known. That was his nickname at Loreto School, Musselburgh, near Edinburgh, and aged about 13. This appears, I'm told, it's the Sunday dress of the school, or was at the time at least. He missed Chile a lot, and he didn't apparently like to write letters because I suppose he didn't want to write how homesick he was. And here we have on the right, he's in Black Watch uniform with the red hackle, which is here on the headgear. That's the Black Watch Regiment's particular mark. In 1944, I think Susan arranged this photograph. She went over to see him in 1944 for about 4 months. Okay, so despite this, by which I mean the sadness of this event, Margaret recalls a childhood full of much laughter with her father. She was almost 13 years old when her brother died. As his sole remaining child, Alexander was clearly determined to do what he could to give her the best possible chance of future happiness. And this is what he wrote in his memoir of his son, Ian, in memory of Lieutenant Ian Lester MacDonald. Margaret is a wonderful consolation to us both. She is such a sweet girl, so full of life, so intelligent, and so devoted to us and her home. She may be untidy and has her faults like everybody else, but her good qualities far exceed her shortcomings. My one great desire now is to see that her life is a happy one, as far as it lies within my power to do so. So Mum got high marks, I'm glad to say. Margaret married Alan Ruxton in Santiago on the 16th of July, 1954. Alexander gave his daughter away at the church ceremony, and then he died soon after in Santiago on the 25th of July, 1954. So he had the satisfaction of doing the honors of giving her away before he died. So we can say mission accomplished. Well, presumably that's what he felt at the time. Okay, I think we can say that fly fishing was Alexander MacDonald's main hobby, although golf probably was a close second, I would say. Chile was and remains a fisherman's paradise. Alexander enjoyed fly fishing in some of the most beautiful and unspoiled countryside in the world. He was persuaded by friends to write an account of his fishing experiences when he was obliged to rest for a few months in 1938 due to an illness. He had a very detailed knowledge of the best fishing rivers and paid great attention to detail in creating maps of the areas he knew. The book was intended as a guide for fly fishermen visiting Chile for the first time and a lure to attract them there. That's my pun there. His passion for the sport is very clear. It was completed in 1940, but he was unable to get it published during World War II due to the lack of paper for non-essential use. He revised the book in 1952, and Susan returned to England after his death in 1954, bringing the manuscript, accompanying photographs and maps to hand on to Margaret and her family. And these are the contents of the original typed manuscript. The foreword by Augustine Edwards McClure. The Edwards family was of Welsh origin and is still a powerful family in Chile today, I think, or very well respected and involved with newspapers and what have you. And here we have, well, it was all in capital letters. This is how it was in the manuscript when I saw it, the typed manuscript. Okay. In the book, he also identified the commercial opportunity represented by Chilean salmon with great and acute foresight, and explained in some detail how it should be nurtured and promoted. This is now one of Chile's main exports to the world. So he wrote, "It is my belief that Chile is the natural salmon country of South America, and that the introduction of salmon should be considered from the industrial as well as the sporting angle. As a further suggestion to the authorities," that would be the government of Chile and local authorities, I suppose, "it would seem practical to engage a young man in the early 30s who has been brought up in a salmon fishery in the Northern Hemisphere and make it worth his while to settle in Chile for the purpose of introducing the real salmo salar, which is Atlantic salmon. Quite apart from the question of salmon, I believe that his usefulness would be felt in the better preservation of the trout fishing and the general improvement of fishing conditions for the visitor, by which he means tourist, I would say. Of course, the authorities would have to be prepared to wait for results and give him proper backing, financial and otherwise, without which his work would be of no avail. The opportunity for the right man would be a big one, and I cannot imagine there would be great difficulty in finding a young enthusiast ready to take the plunge on such a pioneering undertaking. He would certainly carry with him in his work the good wishes of all fishermen in the country. So there we are, promoting fishing as a tourist industry and also as a foodstuff industry. Well, salmon as a foodstuff industry, I should say. All right, so concluding remarks. Alexander MacDonald had an abiding love for his native Scotland and for his adopted country, Chile, and its people, among whom he had many friends. They regarded him as the epitome of a gentleman. He was also a gentleman with a delightful sense of humor and a great record of public service. He and his contemporaries did much to foster Anglo-Chilean relations. This is from a brief biography written in the 1990s, I believe, written by my parents, though it is not, their name is not at the bottom of it. I include this anyway in my transcription of the unpublished version of the fishing book. If we consider his activities in Chile, designing golf courses using his mathematical skills, attempts to promote salmon fishing as a tourist industry to the world through his unpublished book, and ideas for the promotion of the fledgling salmon industry, which is now a major exporter, he clearly desired strongly to contribute to the country's future. Alexander MacDonald's contribution during the Second World War to the war effort received official recognition from the British government in the form of the award of the CBE, thanks presumably to recommendations from staff at the embassy in Santiago who knew him and his activities very well. However, his efforts on behalf of Chile have hitherto not received the acknowledgement that they surely deserve. It is humbly hoped by the presenter that this video will redress the balance to some degree. It may be time to reevaluate his contribution to Anglo-Chilean friendship. And that is in fact not quite the end of my presentation, as I have 3 appendices. And also the sources, sorry. Okay, so sources. This presentation has been compiled from various sources, including written and oral history of family members, birth certificates, university, army and genealogical records, etc. And also the history of Deloitte, written by Sir Russell Kettle and published at Oxford University Press in 1958. And okay, this is the first appendix, which is the 2 books which I have published by Alexander MacDonald, posthumously, of course, and available on lulu.com and Amazon. We know that he certainly wanted the trout fishing book to be published. The title might be slightly different to what he envisaged. McClure in his foreword refers to Angling in Chile, which may have been a working title at some point. I think trout was a word used by Alexander himself, so I've tried to make it a bit more specific by making it trout fishing in Chilean rivers, which I believe is in the spirit of the book and accurately describes it. The book on the left is from the handwritten manuscript, which he produced in 1945 and subsequently. Yes, I transcribed and published that also. It's a more personal account, of course, but we learn a great deal about him in that, as more as a human being, shall we say. And here are his descendants, the Ruxton family. Alan, Margaret, Ian, Sandy, Alexander, Elspeth and Alistair in Cheltenham, Gloucestershire in the 1990s, where my parents lived for many years. And here is the family at my father's 90th birthday party at his Oxford College, Trinity College, on October the 30th, 2015. And you can see the next generation here in the front, particularly. So we carry on in the 21st century. And I think, yes, there is one more. This is the last appendix. Golf courses designed wholly or partly by Alexander MacDonald. So we've got Los Leones in Santiago, 1937, with Agustin Edwards. I'm not sure if that's, I don't think it's McClure, because I don't think he was a golfer, but there are rather a lot of people called Agustin Edwards, and I think this might have been his son, Agustin Edwards Budge, but I can't be sure of this. And this information I got from the web. There is a website about golf courses. Then Pucón, La Peninsula, or the Peninsula Golf Course in Pucón, 1938, December the 8th it opened. A committee was formed in October 1936, 9 holes course with room for expansion to 18. And this, the information here is from Trout Fishing in Chilean Rivers, pages 229 to 233. And then I think it's Rocas de Santo Domingo. I think there are 2 golf clubs now in Santo Domingo. So anyway, Valparaiso, opened in 1946, and he designed all of that, and his portrait is in the clubhouse. We saw it on the second slide in this presentation. And finally, Los Incas in Lima, Peru, in 1949. Again, he did all of this one, and there were others on the drawing board at the time of his death. And that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is the end of the presentation. I think one more slide, thanking you. Yes, thank you very much for watching, and to various family members for their contributions to this research. All errors and omissions are the responsibility of the PowerPoint creator, that's me, who would welcome comments and/or corrections.